Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Danny Show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody, giving you commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. Two things before I get started. First off, shout out to Paul Ramirez. Thank you for your subscription. Speaking of subscriptions, I want to say proudly I have reached 31 subscribers, and I know that's not much, but where I'm from, we're always taught to celebrate the small things and be grateful for small things. Therefore, you can appreciate the bigger things more. That's just where I'm from. But today, we are going to have a special one because today we bask in the glory of Keith Lee. And today I'm going to give you my top 5 favorite matches of Keith Lee, and I am going to give you my thoughts on his release recently. So let's get started with my top 5 picks of my favorite Keith Lee matches, starting at number 5 with Keith Lee versus Randy Orton at Payback 2020. This match was a great one to me. It was really good, and it was good because you have Randy Orton, who is a WWE veteran, and Keith Lee, who is a veteran in his own right. A lot of times we think that when guys come to NXT, they're just new. They're not. Some of them, before they came to NXT, they were bussing on the scenes of Ring of Honor, TNA, and Defiant Wrestling. Defiant Wrestling has a lot of good hard rock themes. Of course, WCPC loaded and stuff like that. Awesome. But staying on task, Keith Lee versus Randy Orton was a great match between two veterans. Keith Lee just being known for independent scenes and then NXT. Randy Orton being on the well-known stage. And it was a great match. Keith Lee would go on to win that match, which makes it part of this list. So, Keith Lee defeats a legend who was once known as the Legend Killer. Isn't that something? Moving on to number 4, NXT versus Smackdown versus Raw Survivor Series match. And the reason why Keith Lee is on this list is because Keith Lee represented NXT for this triple threat 15-man Survivor Series elimination tag match. And what makes it special for him to be on this list as part of my favorite matches of his is two things. Number one, he was one of the last two standing, being him representing NXT and Roman Reigns, head of the table, representing SmackDown. The last thing is this: he put on an amazing performance and almost defeated Roman Reigns. Of course, with Roman Reigns knowing this, he, after getting the victory over Keith Lee, would show respect and sportsmanship to Keith Lee. Even though Roman won that match and Keith did not, Keith got a lot of respect that night. And of course, NXT was the top show of that night. Moving on to number 3, we have Keith Lee versus Adam Cole at the Great American Bash 2020, June 24th. Now, this match was a great match to me. Keith Lee was already North American champion, and Adam Cole, of course, was the NXT champion. And it was a unification match. And it was a very special night for Keith Lee, and an emotional night in some sense, because during that time, he had recently lost his grandmother. No, he lost his grandmother when he was 12. He had recently lost his coach around that time. So that match was dedicated to his grandmother and his recently deceased coach. And he won the North American Championship and the NXT Championship, and becoming the only man to do that in NXT history. So, great memories for Keith Lee that night, and it was a great match. And I especially loved the part, it was very entertaining, when Keith Lee said, "I must break him." Is that a Star Wars line? What line is that from, folks? Y'all let me know. But it was fun. Moving on to number 2, a fatal 4-way match between Keith Lee, Damian Priest, Cameron Grimes to the moon, and of course Dominic Dijakovic, who WWE totally destroyed his character. It, okay, it was a great match. Three three out of four of those guys are giants, and they flew around like cruiserweights. We saw a bit of action from Cameron Grimes himself, but one of the other highlights of that match was Keith Lee double choke slamming two of those competitors in that fatal four-way match. Of course, Keith Lee would go on to win that match and make him the number one contender to face Roderick Strong. And of course, because he won that match, he became the contender and would knock the minds out of. No, no, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say. He would go on to knock the diamonds out of the mind of Roderick Strong. See what I did there? But either way, that fatal four-way match was the start of Keith Lee's journey to becoming both North American and NXT champion. And fun fact, he would have to defeat two members of Undisputed Era to do so. But that fatal four-way match was totally awesome. Before I get to number one, I need to make a couple of honorable mentions. There was an independent match between Keith Lee and his now fiancee, Mia Yim, in an independent show in which Mia Yim won by roll-up. But it was a great match. Another honorable mention is the triple threat match between Keith Lee, Finn Balor, and Johnny Gargano. And I especially love in that match when he rises from the ashes. Just kidding, ladies and gentlemen. I love when he did that. He does it better than I can. But either way, that's another honorable mention. Let's get down to number one. And that number one match was Keith Lee versus Dominic Dijakovic at NXT TakeOver Portland, where Keith Lee defended his North American Championship against well-respected acquaintance Dominic Dijakovic. Let me tell you something. Those two put on such great magic together. Those two together are like Kane and Undertaker, Stone Cold and The Rock, Eddie and Kurt Angle. When you think of stars that just go so well together, these two make that list. And because that match was so great, fun fact, that would be the last time audience members would participate in a WWE event from pay-per-view, because after that, shortly after, the pandemic hit and everyone had to wrestle in total silence. So, that match was awesome. The crowd was awesome. And the comment, I forgot his name, but I really miss having the former NXT commentator there, because now he's doing boxing. He's saying Mamma Mia and Tyson versus Deontay Wilder. But man, he was awesome on NXT commentary. Now we have Beth and Barrett and someone else, and they're both still great. But Beth Marillo, I think, and someone else, those three together were awesome. But of course, bottom line, this match was awesome. If you have not seen this match, you gotta check it out. I know it's hard to believe that Dominic Dijakovic is that good, because they totally killed his character and turned him into this T-bar thing, and it is totally horrible. If anyone should have been let go, you might as well have let him go so he could go somewhere else and be treated properly, instead of letting Keith Bearcat Lee go and be released. But matter of fact, I had two options, but I'm gonna get to that in just a second. Bottom line, I'm getting ahead of myself. Keith Lee versus Dominic Dijakovic, NXT TakeOver Portland. You gotta see it. You just gotta. And if you got it on Peacock, pull up the best of Keith Lee. that match is on there, and it is awesome. Now, to my thoughts on Keith Lee's release. Now, of course, we've seen a lot of people get released. Karrion Kross, Scarlett, Ember Moon, uh, um, Nia Jax. Some people are understanding of that, and Keith Lee. Now, Keith Lee was very interesting. He had battled sickness, and thankfully he got well because there was a sickness and illness going out at the time. But when he came back with this new Bearcat angle. And it was very interesting because instead of being the happy, oh, bask in his glory, I missed that chant. But instead of being the happy bask in his glory guy, he was just completely filled with rage, anger, and aggression. This new angle of Keith Lee was no smiles, but it was very interesting to watch. And right before it could take off, the WWE released him. Darn it. I mean, I'm sorry, guys. I'll say this. If you're not going to use Dominik Dijakovic well, you might as well release him and whoever that other guy is that calls himself Mace, because they were together. He got drafted to SmackDown. Why don't you just release him and keep Karrion and Keith Lee with Scarlett? But hey, that just means Karrion and Scarlett might just go back to TNA, because last I saw them before WWE, they were there. But man, and they did Karrion Kross bad on his first night. Even though I am a huge Jeff Hardy fan, they did, let's admit, they did water him down a little bit. I ain't gonna lie. Even though he was a heel and we were rooting for Jeff, he did get watered down though. My thing is this. There are other options if this is about financial cuts. You could have let Mason T-Bar go, because apparently you're not going to do anything with them but make them competitive jobbers, because all they do is put on good matches and then lose. Keith Lee was so promising. The Bearcat angle was awesome. Dijakovic was promising until you guys killed his talent with the retribution thing. I know it's budget cuts, which sometimes I wonder about, because WWE sells out arenas every single week. So with that being said, it makes me wonder, how are you guys falling on hard times? And I'm not saying you can't, because the pandemic has really affected things. But I'm just saying, there are other things you could have did. I mean, with all due respect, I don't know about releasing Corbin and Madcap Moss. I think the angle between those two is terrible. I think Madcap Moss can be very talented with all those other things he said he was good at, but being happy guys is the happy folks is just not working. But releasing Keith Lee, I mean, you could have let Mace go so that they could go somewhere else and get treated better, but don't let Keith Lee go. And they released Mia Yim, who they also destroyed, and they just totally let everyone get buried. So, I just really think it sucks that he's gone, and tonight he's not going to be on Raw. But hey, hopefully another promotion will bring him in, and hopefully somewhere else, somewhere down the line, we can all bask in the glory of Keith Lee. But until next time, that's all the time I have for you today. Let me know what was your favorite Keith Lee match, and also let me know what you feel about Keith Lee's release. Do you agree with this list? Do you agree with my thoughts on his release? Let me know what you think. Hit the bell, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.